our biggest enemy today, our enemy or issue that we are faced with today is good and evil. And good and evil comes in all shades and colors. And so, yes, you would do your children a disservice if you taught them that they need to only trust people that look like them. And racism sets them up to believe that.
Correct. Yep.
And that is why racism is far more dangerous today than it was back when everybody was wearing sheets.
Welcome to part 2 of our conversation with Ruby Bridges. This is Loki Mulholland, and it's time to get uncomfortable.
It's not as identifiable.
Exactly. Right. Right. And so I believe that all of us who want to live in peace, then we have to unite for that very reason. Doesn't matter what we look like. We have to unite because if we don't, evil is going to win.
Yeah.
Now, I first met you in 2015, and it was when you were receiving the Freedom Award.
Yes.
With my mother and Ava DuVernay. And for me, that was very much a fanboy moment, as it is for a lot of people to meet you. And you, of course, you're so grateful about it and so forth. But what is it? It's kind of a weird question, but what is it like being Ruby Bridges?
That may seem like a weird question, but it's worth explaining because I don't really feel like my life is my own. I believe that for certain people, and it could be anybody, when you accept a calling, there's a calling on your life and you accept it, it's for the greater good, and it's not something that you can turn your back on. Once you make that commitment, and I think you're making that commitment to a higher power, to yourself and your maker. But once you do that, there's really no turning back. I mean, you can decide that you're not gonna do the work anymore. But I don't think your soul will be at peace because you made that commitment. I mean, at least that's how I feel.
Right.
And I do believe that probably most people who accept a certain calling on their life probably feels the same way. I mean, we have to understand that, let's face it, we have to know that there were times when Dr. King did not feel like getting up and going out and marching. There had to be times when he was so afraid, not only for himself, but his family. But he kept doing it.
Right.
It's because he accepted that calling and there was really no turning back.
Right.
And that's when I think your life is really not your own. It's for the greater good.
Right.
And I say that about myself because there was a period of time when, like, for instance, I became a travel agent because I thought I wanted to get out of Louisiana, and that was just for me. When really now in hindsight, I look back and that was a way for my maker to expose me to the wider world, to see things that, I probably wouldn't have had an opportunity to see because I probably wouldn't have left my community. But, it wasn't until in my 30s when I decided I don't want to do this anymore. And I always say that the Lord fired me from my job. I should have been quit a long time ago, just didn't have the guts enough to walk away and do it. So he fired me.
Right.
And not until I was in my 30s did this whole Ruby Bridges and history and everything resurfaced in my life.
Right.
But I know now in hindsight, it was because I was ready to accept the calling on my life. And before then, I wasn't. And so it is almost like a blessing and a curse, you know. And because of my take on my experience, it doesn't always fit into everybody else's agenda.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
Some people really feel like, you know, I should be thinking another way, and maybe my voice isn't a voice that they can use for their own agenda. And that's probably very true.
Right.
Because I believe my voice was given to me by someone else, and that's who I choose to use it for.
Hmm.
And I really have to do that for my own sanity and peace of mind.
Right.
Not anyone else's. So, you know, I remember I was sitting at a dinner table once at a banquet, and everybody was introducing themselves. And by the time they got to me and they said, "So what's your name?" And I said, you know, I didn't say Ruby Bridges, I said Ruby Hall. And so they asked, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, you know, "I'm a public speaker." Naturally, the next question was, "Well, what do you speak on?" And I said, diversity, you know, racism. And they said, "Whoa."
Yeah.
Everybody around the table, and they said, "What would make you choose that?" And I said, "Well, the truth of the matter is I was chosen from the womb."
Mm.
And that really scared them off. But I really sort of felt like that, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, who at 6 years old chooses to do what I did? You know? Nobody. You know, by faith, I feel like I'm doing the work that I'm doing now. You know?
And I mean, obviously your parents made that choice for you to go to the school. I mean, I'm sure you had some semblance of a voice if you wanted to actually, you know, have this option.
Well, no, I didn't have a choice in it. That was another thing that, you know, lots of people, only I think most of us African Americans understand that you never really had a choice, you know, by whatever your parents told you to do back then, that's what you did. You know, it wasn't, you couldn't ask why, you couldn't say no, you know, even if grown-ups were in the same room, you know, talking, you had to leave. You couldn't be in the same room with them when they were having conversations. So it wasn't like I had a choice. But I do believe that if I had handled it differently, kicked and screamed and sick every day and afraid or whatever, maybe they would have said, "No, we're not going to send them back." So it did have something to do with my personality.
Right.
And who I am. And I do believe that it had a lot to do with the teacher that was sent to me.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that, in hindsight, shaped me into who I am today.
That was one of the reasons why I asked you on day 2, did you want to go back? Because I think you had a lot to do with the decisions that were made. The kind of person you were had a lot to do with what happened.
I can tell you this, that, you know, I all the time I meet people, especially young people, who say, "Oh, you know, you're my hero. You were so brave. You had so much courage." And yet and still, I always revert back and say, you know, it was the innocence of a child that protected me, you know, not really knowing. And then when I finally found out, it was, you know, finally when there was a little boy who said, "I can't play with you. I can't play with you because my mom said you're a nigger."
Right.
Not to play with you. Well, at that moment when he said that, that's when everything became very clear to me.
Mm.
It wasn't college. It wasn't Mighty Girl.
Right.
The reason why nobody's in this school with me is because of me and the color of my skin. Even at 6 years old, he made it very clear to me.
Was that the first time?
Yeah, it was the first time.
What I'm getting at is that's the first time you were called the N-word.
To my face. I mean, I don't know if somebody had said it, you know, knowingly, yes. That was the first time.
Did you have to go home and ask your parents what that was, or did you already know at that point?
No, I kind of knew that it wasn't my name. And I, you know, again, you know, I spent every summer in Mississippi on my grandparents' farm. So it wasn't like I didn't hear that. We didn't have that talk, whatever. But to have another child to look me in the face and say, that's why you can't play with me, that was very jarring for me.
And it comes back to that child learned that.
Exactly. Well, basically what he said is, I can't play with you because you're a nigger.
Right.
My mom said not to play with you.
Right.
And even though he said that to me and called me that name, yeah, he hurt my feelings because it wasn't my name, but it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Because that didn't happen until later in the year when I kept trying to figure out why there were no kids there and wanted somebody to play with. So it was almost like him saying that answered all of my questions.
Yeah.
And, for me, I even now to this day, people that really know me, I had a friend say, Dr. Bridges, this is kind of crazy, but he said, Dr. Bridges, you want everything raw. Don't hide anything from you. Slit the cow's throat, throw him on the table. And you'll deal with it from there, which is pretty much true. I can't figure it out if it's muffled and covered up in lies, and I can't figure it out.
Yeah.
I have to be able to have the truth so that I can then make my next move.
And you and I have talked about this on several occasions as you talk about that, really coming back down to good and evil. We can dress it however we want to dress it. Are you comfortable talking about the evil, how you kind of came to that point, or do you not want to talk about that?
Yeah, no, I don't really want to talk about it, but this is what I will say. I believe that it just is what we just said early on, that all of us, we do ourselves and we do our kids a disservice if we try to teach our kids that you need to only trust your own kind, because we don't live in a world like that today. We see everything that's happening in the world that is very different pretty much from, it's so blatant now from what we experienced when we were growing up. Yes, African Americans were hung and killed, and Emmett Till and all these horrible ways, and hangings and lynchings and all of that. But today, kids today, it's almost like they're desensitized. Because you can just walk down the street and there's a body. There's babies being killed. There's people, no matter who they are and what race, creed, or color. They're being thrown in the back of cars and set on fire. Innocent babies. It's just horrendous right now. So there's so much evil around us and can happen at any moment. The mass shootings. I'd gone to Sandy Hook School when I was promoting my first book. And then later, 2 years later, to find out that someone went in there and just murdered babies. And a teacher who explained what that was like, hiding in a closet and having a police officer hold them by the hand and say, don't open your eyes, while they step over babies' bodies, and they could smell the blood. Those are the times that we are living in right now. That's evil. And so I think all of us need to be aware of what is really out there and what we're really facing today.
Yeah.
And I do believe that there is more good in the world than evil. I really do. It's just that all of us who are good, we need to stop picking and choosing who we want to unite with.
Right.
Because evil isn't picking and choosing. Evil doesn't care what you look like. All evil wants is an opportunity for you to open up and let it come in and work through you. Doesn't care. Evil is not prejudiced. Evil isn't like us. Evil isn't racist at all. We're racist. Mm-hmm. And yet we consider ourselves good. Well, if we're good, we need to stop picking and choosing because we need more soldiers.
And what's interesting to me is that choice to do good. And at 6 years old, you have this teacher who made a choice to do good, and the impact that she had. I mean, imagine if you had a different teacher, how that could have played out. If you know what I mean? So one person can make that difference, and look at the difference that one person made in your life and the difference that you are making in the lives around you.
Absolutely. Because those other 3 girls didn't have a teacher like that. Mm. So their experience was very different.
Right.
You know, and, you know, sometimes I get a lot of pushback about that, you know, well, it wasn't just you by yourself. There were other 3 girls. Well, no, I was by myself. I was by myself. Simply because you and I do the same thing on the same day, but it's in different places, doesn't mean we have the same experience.
Right.
Doesn't mean that we're going to take away the same lesson. So it's not that I consider myself better or whatever. It's just that I was alone. Mm-hmm. I can't change history and what happened. I was alone. I had a different teacher. I took away a different experience.
And people take from that experience.
Exactly.
And, you know, I mean, it's the same thing with my mom in respects to, like, you know, they see themselves in some of that experience that she represents for them, just as you represent, you know, for other people as well. And that's why we need to tell these stories, because everyone is going to connect with different people. And as long as we continue to show that light of each person, you know, that's where we're really going to make that change. But we got to be willing to speak it. And my mom didn't want to share her story. She said, I ruined a perfectly good retirement. You know, you were outed as Ruby Bridges eventually.
Yeah.
You kind of just were, you know, just Ruby Bridges, not Ruby Bridges, the 6-year-old.
Right.
Until years later, and this is thrust back upon you, but that mantle you now then took and had to accept. I had this conversation with Rena Evers once, the daughter of Medgar Evers, who was assassinated in his driveway in Mississippi in 1963. And there is this sort of sense of that people want her to continually be that 8-year-old girl crying for her father, right? And that she doesn't want to necessarily be that child, but that at the same time, she also understands the need for people to hear that and to experience that story, to learn from it. And so there is this. Do you ever feel that people just want you to be that 6-year-old girl going to school all the time? Don't tell us anything else. We don't want to hear anything else. Just tell us the 6-year-old girl story once again. Right.
Yes. Well, that's all the time. And I do understand that, except when I open myself up and allow people to get close to me, I consider you as a friend, a brother, or a sister. So I don't want to be talking about the Ruby Bridges that you want to hear about, the 6-year-old. You know, what people don't really realize about me, except the people that are very close to me, is that I have an incredible sense of humor. You know, and my family, that's what they love about me the most. Now, surely I have issues with my family like everybody else. You know, not everybody's in love with me. Trust me. But still, if they're around me for any length of time, they're going to end up laughing about something because I do have an incredible sense of humor.
Yeah, we've had some good laughs in Tennessee, you know.
Right.
I think I refer to that as that's the point at which you make the transformation. If you're talking to people about the 6-year-old and they never understand that there was a transformation that took place, that you became who you are now.
Yes.
Then you haven't gotten the message across, and they don't want to hear that. And the
Right.
people that don't want to hear that part, you know, what you became, what that 6-year-old girl became, if they don't want to hear that, they're going to miss the message.
Exactly.
It's a process. And that's
Yes.
that's what I know people miss that a lot. And they don't want to hear that because it may mean that they have to change. It
Yes.
may mean that they have to understand what that 6-year-old understood and what the 30-year-old understood.
Exactly.
And they don't want to do that.
Right.
That's what happens.
Yes. And I think, you know, I'm in such demand when I speak. It's because I believe it's just the truth. I'm only going to stand and tell you the truth as I know it.
Mm-hmm.
Good, bad, or ugly.
Right.
That's what you're going to get from me. And there, you know, and I'm going to walk you with me through those trials and tribulations and the lessons that I learned along the way that makes me who I am today. That's all I'm going to share with you
Right.
whenever I'm asked to speak.
Right.
But there's so many lessons in that growing process that brought me to where I am and who I am today.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
That I will try to explain to you why I am who I am and how I think and why I think. Now, I'm not really trying to change you. You know, someone asked me that today. And it's like, you know, first of all, I chose to work with kids. I'm not trying to change any adults.
Right.
You know, I believe because I have 4 kids and I know that they can get me to do things that I don't necessarily want to do, especially my grandkids, that I'd rather work with the kids and have them come back and ask you the hard questions.
Right.
And have you explain it to them. You know, and hopefully some of those questions might make you think. They'll probably be a lot more successful at getting you to change than I will be.
Right. You know what the problem is that so many of us don't listen to the children because they only know how to be truthful.
Exactly.
They only know how to tell you what's going on. They don't know how to do subterfuge. That's
Right.
why they're so nice to talk to.
Exactly.
And people
and yes.
don't understand that.
Right.
But
But that's
those are the people.
yeah, and I tell people all the time that is the path I chose. That's what I try very, very hard to stay on that path. I often say that it's because my experience comes from that of a child. And I know what worked for me, and I pretty much know what other kids are going to see, just as my eyes saw at 6. And that's why I have such a really, really good rapport with kids. And that's my base is kids. And that's my lane, and I'm going to stay in it because that's what I believe I was brought here to do.
Mm.
Yeah, I totally understand that. But I used to go out and I would speak in junior high schools and high schools, and I would talk to children because they haven't made up their mind.
Right.
So I want them to know me and I want them to know what I went through, but they have a choice.
Exactly.
And they understand now that you have a choice.
Right.
Older people will stand there and argue with you all day about whether or not
Exactly.
I'm not looking for arguments. I've had enough
Right.
of those. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly. That's exactly my philosophy about it all. Yeah, I choose not to do that. That's not what I want to do. I'm not trying to convince any grown up.
Right.
You know, we all know and understand, and we're going to stand before whoever it is, and we're going to answer for ourselves.
Right.
That's
exactly.
on you how you think. but a child is innocent and they just need the facts.
That's all.
Right.
That's it.
So Ruby, you have a foundation.
Yes, I started the Ruby Bridges Foundation just simply because once I was promoting that first book, when they actually found me, I was in the school that I integrated, working with the after school program. And I really wanted to do something for the kids. And so I started this very small after school program where we were teaching dance, piano, and etiquette. And once the book was published, the first book by Dr. Robert Coles, who was my child psychologist, he turned the royalties over to me. And that led me to start the Ruby Bridges Foundation. So all the royalties from that book go directly into that organization. And it was to continue to run those after school programs. I did that for a little while. We started a program called Ruby's Bridges, where we were connecting schools. And it was because I was traveling all across the country and saw how different schools were. You know, I remember going to Detroit and kids were sitting in a room with coats on and it was snowing outside and the windows were all broken. And I just thought, oh my God, I remember being in a place like this when I was living in the housing projects. And then I would visit private schools in California where there were Olympic-sized swimming pools and cafeterias that looked like 4-star restaurants. Every kid had a laptop. Only 6 kids were in the classroom with 3 teachers. And I thought to myself, now, where do you think our next leaders are going to come from? That a kid from that school in Detroit, I don't care if he was straight A's up and down, he would not be able to compete with those other kids in that private school, because what he's going to need is somebody to open the door and give him a chance. And that's already built in those other schools. And so I saw that and I just thought, education in this country, it's just never going to be equal. Not until we figure out a way to make it free for everybody. But anyway, that's why I started that program called Ruby's Bridges, because I wanted to connect those schools together, the private schools with the schools that were struggling. And we did that for a while until Hurricane Katrina hit. And once Hurricane Katrina hit, the school that I integrated took on like 7-8 feet of water. They were going to tear it down. And that became my plight, to save the school and have it restored. And sure enough, 5 years later, FEMA came in and they gave about $25 million and restored that school. So now it's been open for maybe 3-4 years. So I accomplished that. And now my goal really is to start my own summer camps. I think when this is all over and kids can come back together again, that I want to create an environment where they can come together to learn together, to grow together, play together, get to know each other.
Wow.
So that's what the Ruby Bridges Foundation is all about.
That's beautiful. I want to go back to that moment when we first met in 2015, and I've had the pleasure to see you on multiple occasions and stuff, and enjoyed those times. But there was something you said to me about my mother, and you said, take care of her. She's a national treasure.
She is.
And Ruby, you are a national treasure.
Well, thank you.
We're so grateful that you were so willing to join us this evening and taking your time out, and it's just always just wonderful to see you. I mean,
well, thank you so much. at some point, we all do need to take some time to get together just to laugh and enjoy each other's company. And not be so serious all the time. This is some very, very serious work. And as hard as we work, we need to play just that hard.
Yeah.
Be energized and to go back out there in the fight again. So I'm hoping that when this is over, that we will be able to gather someplace and just laugh and have a great time.
Yeah.
As long as it's not Mississippi, I'm in.
All right. I look forward to it. Thank you guys so much. It was a pleasure talking to both of you.
Appreciate it.
It was nice meeting you.
Give my best to Malcolm, and looking forward to getting to Bill Street with him.
I know. I will. I'll definitely tell him. Good night, guys.
All right. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be afraid to get uncomfortable.